please sit down. A candlelit shadow on the wall near the bed.
It is my huge honour and great thrill to be sitting here with Mr. Gary Numan. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming and doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. Nice to meet you.
This is like all my Christmases coming together in one go. It's extraordinary. First of all, I'm going to apologise in advance. This is the first time I've ever interviewed anyone.
Seriously?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's not my day job. And, well, first of all, congratulations on the new album. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Are you having a good time sort of touring with that? And...
Yeah, it's a very good album to play live. It's quite diverse. There's a good sort of dynamic range to it, but the big songs are really exciting. Yeah, they're huge. Live.
It's a mighty monolithic album, isn't it? It's sort of huge.
It has its moments, yeah.
But with a kind of it's very melodic as well, sort of haunting kind of qualities in there, but big sound.
Yeah, and that's why it's good live, because it has that variation to it. Now you can drop right down to a song like Lost, which is essentially just piano and vocal, and you're right close on the mic and making it as emotional as possible. And then there's something like Love, Hurt, Bleed, which is just this massive stomper. So it's really good. It's got a lot more variation than the last sort of few albums that I've made, and I think it's better for that.
And where do you think, coming to this album now with Splinter, in terms of your sort of musical evolution then, how would you describe that journey from that sort of mid to late 70s period right up to now? How would you describe the arc of that journey?
I think if I was to go from Splinter back to the early days and not include the bits in between, there'll be a very smooth line, actually. I see a lot of connection between Splinter and things like Replicas and Pleasure with the earlier albums. I think the problem is the bit in the middle, where it all goes a bit wonky, really.
Back right at the beginning, what was it that connected you? How did you find what your thing was in the first place? Because the sci-fi stuff I connect with as well. That was a big part of what sort of got me into your music and, and the whole kind of the lonely android thing that was going on there. What was the first thing that you came across that influenced you in that way?
To get into that sort of thing, it wasn't music at all. It was actually books, Philip K. Dick, and not Barrows so much, actually. That was later. J.G. Ballard, I guess, Asimov, all that kind of early sci-fi stuff. I loved all of that. I was writing... I got into synthesizers by accident. I went to a studio to make a punk album. I was in a three-piece punk band, which is called Tube My Army. And... went to a studio to record what should have been our debut punk album, and there was a synthesizer in the studio, a mini Moog in the corner, and they let me have a go of it, and I had no idea how to set them up, but I was fascinated. But I loved the sounds that came out of it, and very hastily, in the few days that I was there, kind of converted all of my punky songs to electro punky songs. Went back to the record company with that. We were really unhappy. It wasn't what they wanted at all. So we had a bit of a fight about that, but eventually they went with it. I think more because they didn't have any money to send me back, really.
That was the one chance.
Yeah, so they sort of went with it because they had to.
And was that wasn't Replicas?
No, that was the one before. It was called Tube My Army.
Yeah.
But while I was making that, I was actually writing short stories at home, sci-fi stories. And I became massively prolific because I loved the synth electronic thing so much. It just became, I was obsessed by it. So I started to write the next album almost immediately. It was released within, I think, 6 months of the first one coming out. So I wrote and recorded it within 6 months. But I decided to convert these sci-fi stories that I was writing into lyrics. You said, which is why Replicas is very sci-fi. It was actually a sci-fi book I was trying to write.
You know, when you were really pioneering that kind of electric sound, the kind of that whole in those first three albums, certainly, did you feel like there was a lot of anti-that feeling going around?
There was quite a lot. I mean, I wasn't the first one to be doing it by any means. I was lucky enough to be the first one to be really successful with it. So I get a lot of credit for starting it, and I didn't really. Ultravox were on their third album when I made my first. Kraftwerk, clearly. I've been doing it for quite some time. And there was a lot of hostility, people that thought it wasn't real music, that the machines made it. It was a lot of ignorance, actually. They had no idea that you stood at home with a piano, you write everything the way people have done forever. You just then put it onto synthesizers and you play it on the synthesizer.
I suppose part of that kind of fear of it becoming sort of dehumanized or something, I guess, was also accentuated by the fact that the look, the concept that you kind of seem to embody, that the sort of cold, pale-faced, alien, kind of aloof, distant kind of character, which was so fantastic. I mean, that's where all the different ideas sort of coalesced together. But I guess that accentuated that sense, didn't it?
I think it did, and partly I'm to blame for that, because I created the image in the first place.
But is it true that that was slightly accidental, that you were sort of given this sort of look at one day accidentally?
Not quite. I had the look on the album cover. That was already done, although I had white hair on the album cover. So the clothing, the not smiling, all that sort of thing was part of the image on the cover. But when it came time to take it onto the TV, when we did Top of the Pops with it for the first time, for example, I was really nervous. I was always embarrassed about my front teeth, because when I was younger, they were... I've grown into them as I've got older, but I thought they were too big, look like Bugs Bunny. So I didn't want to smile because I was embarrassed about my teeth. And I was really nervous. And so I went on and did the performance that I did, partly nervous, partly not wanting to smile, blah, blah, blah. And then I started to see the reaction to that. And people were talking about me as this cold, androidy-looking person. And I thought that was quite cool. So then I made it a thing.
How aware were you of what was going on with the whole kind of the Blitz Club and that sort of what became known as the New Romantic movement and all that? Were you aware of that going on?
Yeah, I used to go to Blitz Club.
Right.
In fact, I fell out with them we did Top of the Pops for the first time. And me and Billy Curry used to go there, I think it was, and me and my friend Paul, I can't remember, but two of us. And then we went there after our first Top of the Pops to celebrate, and Steve Strange wouldn't let them in. Because I don't let me in because I was a member, but we wouldn't let anyone else in, and I just thought...
Well, and Billy eventually became part of Visage with Steve, didn't he?
Yeah, ironic.
Yeah, and so what do you remember about that time, about the Blitz Club and all that going on?
It was, we went there because it was the only place you could kind of go at that time without getting beaten up, looking the way that we did. When Blitz came along, it was kind of a safe haven, and I loved the music that they played. But this is before New Romantic. New Romantic was probably 2 years in the making. It wasn't a New Romantic scene. It was still very early electronic days, and they would mainly be playing David Bowie and Kraftwerk and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Songs like Our Friends Electric Cars, obviously, and songs on this new album as well. For all the kind of darkness of the concept, or the kind of coldness of the presentation or whatever, there's a kind of joyfulness that comes with it. There's a playfulness and a joyfulness, and I think that's in this new album as well, on the songs of the new album.
I would agree with that. Quite how that's happened, I'm not sure, because it's pretty dark subject matter. Yeah, really.
But there's something very celebratory about it. It's kind of
I was talking about that with a Turkish man this morning, and I come up with a small theory, which may be true, in that the writing of those songs is very much sort of therapeutic. It's very much helping me to deal with what I was going through before. I went through this depression thing and medication and all that, which is what the album is about. But I think because when I was writing the songs about it, it was kind of releasing all of that and really helping me to deal with it. That's why it isn't coming across as depressing, because I was actually getting better by writing those songs.
You know what? It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so very much. And to be able to look at this whole circle of life of Gary Numan. We seem to have come back to where we began. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.